Welcome to the Near Memo, a weekly conversation about search, social, and commerce. What happened, why it matters, and the implications for local.
And speaking of new technologies, Mike Blumenthal, Apple introduced Tap to Pay this week. It was anticipated, but what's it all about?
So 2020, in July, they bought a company called MobiWeave out of Montreal that had developed technology that allowed the newer iPhones to be used as a payment terminal without any hardware. So you don't need a Square box or a PayPal box attached in the port. You just take your new type card that David likes to use so much and you bump it up against an iPhone and you've made a payment. And it's just so interesting. It's very interesting to me because as David pointed out, in the payment side of contactless payment, while Apple is far and away the most used in the United States, there isn't a huge use case for continuing growth of that use because of the advent of smart cards. But now Apple has figured out how to get on the other side of that equation, become a terminal, which at this point in 15.4, the next version of the operating system, it appears that there are APIs available to this, which will allow companies like Stripe to push their payment system out into the real world, which is where I think the rubber really meets the road. I don't think the micro merchant aspect of it is all that important. I think it's interesting, and I think that having more micro merchants with the ability to process payments is interesting. But I think the real rubber in this is those APIs replacing, even working with Square and replacing the little dongle that Square needs. It positions Apple's iPhone as a processing device, and they're going to use it in their store, so you'll be able to pay right when you talk to an associate rather than going to some, other. You can do it now, but they're using a
I just did it
box
about a couple months ago, where there isn't a cashier at the Apple store. So
right, and so they're pushing that the iPhone as this sort of cashierless solution to larger partners, which I think is interesting, and its timing is right. The purchase of that company was right. The COVID's impact on contactless payment has been, up and to the right, and Apple is going to insert themselves successfully and usefully in the payment process. Now, whether they become payment processors themselves at some point, whether they get a cut for this, none of that's clear. Whether it's going to be available on the iPad, that's not clear. But it certainly positions the iPhone as a terminal in many situations, and I think it speaks to iPhone sales and the growth of this whole industry. And they're going to be playing an interesting role in it.
If it's built into the next OS release, it'll work on the iPad, I'm sure.
Yes, but they made no mention of it, and it does require like 10x, like the 10 XR or above phone. So there's something about the secure enclave on the phone that's needed to support the privacy of the transaction. So it doesn't work on any phone. So I don't know which iPads or if they all have that feature. No idea. But it positions Apple well for the whole terminal business, right? For Shopify, which I think uses Stripe, et cetera. So I think it's an interesting play, and they're coming into it right at the right time. I think I read that 50% of Americans are using contactless payment cards at this point, or 51%, and that's only going to grow. Interestingly, in the United States, a very low percentage of debit cards are contactless, but clearly that's going to grow as well.
It seems interesting to me as well from a developing world standpoint of, all of these micro merchants in stalls in whatever marketplace around the world, just being able to, have their phone as their point of sale. And I haven't looked at the numbers in a long time. I'm sure you're much more up on this, but it feels like this is where Apple is more disadvantaged relative to Android than here in the US in the developing world. And if this is a way for them to sort of, increase adoption of the iPhone in markets where they've slowed or have stopped growing, seems like a huge impact there potentially.
Yeah, well, India is a good example of that. They did actually have a great quarter in India this last quarter, first one in a long time, but they've shifted manufacturing to India to get sort of favored positioning there. But their average price for a phone in India is $900 versus the average price of most other phones about $200, $150, $200, and many come in cheaper. So you're absolutely right. I think it could be a huge play in that market for the direct, let's just transact here. And that gives Apple the opportunity to become a payment processor, which is another cut of every dollar, another subscription fee that's could be very lucrative.
A number of things strike me. I mean, one of which is like this just adds sort of incrementally to the perception, and many Android users would disagree, but this adds incrementally to the perception that the iPhone is just a better phone than Android devices. You've got privacy, you've got, payments now and other features that just seem to elevate it across versus the run-of-the-mill Android phone. What I was struck by was, the peer-to-peer kind of dimensions for this, like the Venmo style transactions. I mean, I don't know. That's not a market that Apple's going to make any money off of, but it will potentially reinforce, just like the blue bubble, green bubble messaging cultural thing. I mean, this may be appealing to young people who do a lot of Venmoing, when they go out to eat or whatever. There's a lot of peer-to-peer payments activity going on, and this may maybe play into that as well.
I wouldn't mind an alternative Venmo. I periodically in my Venmo stream see every transaction from somebody I've done business with because they don't know to shut off to change their privacy settings. All of a sudden, I'm looking at my plumber who doesn't want to be a business. He wants me to pay him. I'm seeing how much he paid his daughter and his wife this last week. It's like,
that's
TMI.
really unfortunate. Yeah, that's really unfortunate. That's the big problem with Venmo is just the privacy dimension.
I mean,
and that's of course owned by PayPal.
Right.
So
Apple
Apple's
Cash has a
strength
play.
of actually caring and putting privacy first in a lot of their implementation of new technologies. So
I'd be curious to know with Apple Cash and Apple Cash likes products, how much money just sits there before it gets transferred. Because I never, it comes in when I may do a credit card purchase. It comes in a little bit here, a little bit there, but a little bit here, a little bit there by millions of people ends up being a lot of money sitting in Apple's bank. And
well, certainly they don't need the cash. They don't need
that. They don't.
But it's just another because they can kind of thing. There's probably some sort of fintech master plan behind all this. It's not entirely clear, but I think it's an interesting development. It doesn't seem like something that, I mean, you point out that maybe third parties will take this into the enterprise or take this to the mass market, but it doesn't seem like an enterprise thing. If you're a major retailer or a restaurant chain or anybody in that category, you're going to have existing kind of hardware that you're invested in and associated.
Although
software.
I could imagine a restaurant equipping people with wait people with phones and payment at the table with the phone. Just tap, boom, and you're done.
That's what happens in Europe,
right?
You don't. You just
those devices are awful.
Yeah, well, they bring the little calculator, whatever the hell it is, to you. You get the receipt right there. Nobody goes up to a register. I mean, it's really no different than taking the card back to some central place, having them process it, and bringing back the receipt. But it's just the way that it's typically done, and so that is very plausible. What you said, Mike, about the sort of another interesting enterprise scenario is this idea of the Apple Store, kind of no cash wrap, no central place where you have to stand in line, and having people wandering the store, being able to check you out on demand, I think is a really interesting thing, especially with what's going on with Amazon and its kind of just walk out technology. So that's an enterprise retail use case that I think is pretty interesting and would be welcomed by a lot of customers. Can I help you buy something? I mean, that also might increase sales, right? Are you ready to buy? I can take care of you right now. So,
which does seem to be the case with Apple Pay anyways. People spend more, average ticket on Apple Pay is above, I mean, obviously it's a well-heeled clientele, but it appears to be even above average ticket for that group of people anyways on Apple.
With a credit card even?
Apparently, from what I read. I don't know that, but.
So that's pretty interesting because to me it's identical. It's because it ultimately backs onto a credit card. I just like it because it's faster than the credit card.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily make me think, oh, I'm not paying at all, which is the psychology, removing. There's no real payment happening here. Let me just get the extra thing that I have in my.
The problem where I live is it's so erratic, right? Either maybe they don't accept American Express at this particular place, or this place has it, but it's not working.
Even
right?
here in Portland, it's very erratic. So that's why I'm still with the physical card in large measure as well. So.
Yeah, every single grocery store that I shop at, and there's 6 of them, takes it now. They all have terminals.
So I think only one of them takes it here. That I think Whole Foods is the only one that I know.
Yeah. Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, Safeway, Lucky.
Right. My favorite grocery store takes it, but they don't take American Express, which is my preferred Apple Pay tap to pay card.
Same.
So that's part of the problem. It's American Express, but
why is that?
They
why
charge
are you preferring them?
Well,
because
American Express charges more to the merchant, so many merchants don't like it because it's
no. Why do you prefer American Express to Visa, for example?
It just happened to be because I flew on Delta a lot. It was where I was accumulating.
Oh, so you have a loyalty card?
Which I'm going to get rid of, but that's where it's been. I'm not particularly loyal to American Express, but it just happens that's where it's been.
Yeah, it seemed it's a very not Mike Blumenthal kind of position, I think.
Right. Well, there was a period where since flying on Delta's card
I want a
American
spin-off
Express.
podcast to explore that thread, Greg.
I now have 250,000 frequent flyer miles. I don't know what I'm going to do with them.
Well, you'll go somewhere at some point. I mean, this isn't going to last forever. I'm sitting on almost 600,000 frequent flyer miles. So it's enough trips to Berlin, and you start accruing them. Okay, so we're out of time. Anybody want to say any last words before we adjourn for the week?
No, thanks for listening again. Thanks to those of you who took our reader survey. It really has helped us sort of advance some of our ideas for where to focus in 2022, and we hope to follow up with a more formal survey, hopefully equally brief, here in the next week to 10 days. So thanks for those of you who already participated and who will participate on the next one.
Thanks for joining David, Mike, and Greg. To stay on top of the latest developments in local, subscribe to our newsletter at nearmedia.co. We'll see you next week.